Hey everyone, this is going to be a little different than my normal streams, but hopefully you still appreciate it. So, a little bit of background about me. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for around 5 years now, and the one thing I noticed when I started trying to learn the game was the amount of gatekeeping that happened while I was going around to game stores trying to figure out how to play. It was a huge issue for me and almost barred me from one of my favorite hobbies. Thankfully, I stuck with it, but it was hard. I didn't have any basis for learning besides a couple of free books online. I didn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on something I didn't even know if I'd like. But after 5 years, three campaigns that I've ran, another two campaigns I've been a player in, as well as countless one shots I've ran, I wanted to share some of the knowledge that I've attained. Keep in mind here that these are my opinions for the most part. These should be the basis of your own research. I hope everyone can appreciate these videos if you're brand new to the hobby or if you've been playing since first edition. I bet we'd have a lot to talk about. So this series is going to be broken up into about 30-minute videos, give or take, and they'll all go over a different theme. If you'd like to see a specific theme or you have any sort of question, please don't hesitate to send it over to me or comment on this video. I'd love to have a back and forth with y'all. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. It is a dark and stormy night. You're exhausted from walking all day when you finally pull into a town. Mostly disheveled, you see a few lights on inside of a building on the other edge. In the dark and quiet town. As you move closer, you realize the building is exactly what you've been looking for, an inn and a tavern. You open the wooden door and are immediately hit with the scents from inside. Warm air washes over you. Thankfully, it isn't too late into the night, and you can still smell some of the meats and soups being prepared, as well as hear the muffled chatter voices as you step inside. Glancing around, you notice most of the tables seem to be occupied by mostly uninteresting workaday types. But off in the back, you see a large table of 13 people covered in armor, weapons, scrolls, and magical items. You sigh as you know the trouble is on the horizon. So, today we're gonna start with the absolute basics of the different classes, so not getting into the rules so much as an overarching idea of which class you might want to play. I will preface this by stating that I do have an aversion to the more down and dirty character types, but I'll include them in here and I'm not going to try and sway you one way or the other. This is part of that gatekeeping that I was talking about. The first of our 13 members of the table, clad in heavy armor adorned with holy symbols, wielding a great broadsword, we have our first party member, the Paladin. Paladins normally are played as lawful good, always striving to do the right thing, but don't let this limit the scope of your character. Paladins are trained in one martial weapon and a shield, or two martial weapons. They're known as half casters. It's a class where you get some spells, but the really big and powerful ones aren't going to be available to you. They're the followers of a particular god inside of the pantheon of the game, and I'm not going to speak too much on the pantheons of D&D, mostly because I've a world that I created which has a completely different pantheon. But at their most basic level, paladins are going to be granted some of their power from their god in order to keep justice in the world. Starting when you reach your third level, paladins are going to choose an oath in which to follow, which is normally, but not exclusively, one of the tenets of their chosen god and religion. As they keep gaining more strength, they're going to gain additional abilities either from their oath or just being a paladin. We've got 12 more of these to get through, so I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible to keep this video around 30 minutes. Scanning your eye further along the table in a shocking difference to who you just saw. You see a closed off individual, not contributing to the conversation of the table as a whole, but instead with their face buried in a book, casually using a bit of flame coming out of their finger as illumination. Wearing mostly robes and a bandolier of scrolls across their chest, you set your eyes firmly on the wizard. Wizards are masters of the arcane, and they have the widest variety of spells available for them to learn. But they need to actually find the spells in books and copy it into their own spell book. That's the only way they're going to learn the spell. Wizards are usually not on the front lines and don't have any real training on how to use armor, so they're normally referred to as squishy because they don't have a lot of health and can't protect themselves through normal means. Wizards are normally trained in some sort of school where they focus on a particular type of magic, referred to as a school of magic, because the creators couldn't come up with anything more interesting, probably. Wizards are known as full casters and will stay mostly in the back of a fight, waiting for the moment to unleash the primal power of magic on an unsuspecting foe or teleport the party out of an unwinnable scenario. A wizard also has the unique ability to use a ritual spell by writing the spell in their ritual book. Not every spell can be cast as a ritual, and we can go into the different types of spells down the line. Because they've got such an expansive spell book, they need to choose certain spells to prepare when they wake up in the morning, so plan well. As they progress in power, they gain the ability to cast even more powerful spells. This class makes it a great utility or Swiss Army knife sort of a class because of the broad range of spells that they have at their disposal. As you continue down the line, you move to the next table patron, 6 feet tall when they're sitting, and are wearing almost no armor with bulging muscles and holding a keg in one hand that they are continuously drinking out of. You see the barbarian. Barbarians are known for their strength over all else, usually wielding some sort of two handed weapon like a great axe, maul, tree, etc. Getting up close with their enemies and overwhelming them, the biggest ability you will use is going to be your rage ability, where you do increased damage and do decreased damage, and decreased damage is done to you. At third level, you get to choose one of the barbarian paths, which trigger different abilities whenever you enter into your rage. Lovers of fighting, drinking, and all things merry, a barbarian is a great class to play if you're just starting with D&D and you don't want to take the time to read and prepare spells, but just hit things and do a lot of damage to the big bad evil guy, commonly referred to as the BBEG. They make sure they're the center of attention in a fight. Beside the hulking barbarian, you see someone in a cloak, not showing their face and seemingly moving with the shadows of the candlelight on the table. Looking closer, you notice the hints of metal daggers sticking out of their sleeves, and you instinctively check your pockets to make sure you still have enough money to pay the bartender. Rogues are very well known, but just in case you haven't really heard of them before, they're masters of being sneaky. Directly opposite of the barbarian, in a fight, you won't know you've been attacked by a rogue until you're lying on the floor, seeing your life flash before your eyes. At third level, you will choose a roguish archetype. All of those deal with being stealthy in some way, but have wildly different abilities. A rogue isn't a frontline fighter per se, but you'll definitely want them to attack first so that they can get high amounts of damage done before the fight even starts. One of the most important parts of playing a rogue is their ability to use your bonus action, which is a smaller action in combat that's, in my opinion, mostly overlooked, to hide, run away from an opponent, or double the distance that you can move. These are referred to as the hide, disengage, and dash actions, respectively. Most rogues use daggers, but there's an assortment of different weapons available for them. And some rogues can even cast spells. They're also able to check for traps as your party is moving through a dank dungeon. I could go on about the rogues, but we only have a limited amount of time, like I said, and I can do a more complete class workup later. Someone in full plate armor waves a holy symbol over their plate of food and clutches it tight to their chest before taking a bite and trying to recite a prayer that seems to make the barbarian glow for a moment. We have the cleric. Clerics are the healers of the D&D world. They're given plate armor as a way to protect them on the battlefields while trying to heal and in some cases revive wounded soldiers. A cleric is a full caster that inherently knows all of their spells as they're granted to them by their god, and it's kind of just like the paladin, but they have their own full spell list. They're also adept fighters, and some clerics will even forego trying to heal entirely in favor of a faster way of protecting the party, absolutely murderizing anyone who would think to cause the party harm. Traditionally, they'll only break out of the offensive spells in dire circumstances, but some players choose that as a specialty and just hope that the expensive healing potions will be plentiful inside of whatever dungeon they find themselves in. Clerics also need to prepare their spells, praying to their god to bestow some of their power unto them every morning. This is another class where you'll probably want to think about exactly what the party will be getting into before you leave camp. As you're building your character, you'll choose your divine domain. Like the paladin, they usually adhere to the scriptures of the god that they follow. So at level 10, they're actually able to use divine intervention, which is an incredibly powerful ability where you ask your god to help you in some way. You don't automatically succeed at this, but having an actual god come down to personally aid you and your party can be one of the most powerful moments inside of a game. Sitting next to the cleric is another hooded figure with a bow and quiver strung across their back. Sitting behind them is a fully grown wolf, lazily having their tongue stick out as it catches a little bit of meat thrown to it by the ranger. Rangers mainly grew up in the wilderness and usually come with an animal friend that will aid them in battles as well as probably being the cutest thing in the party. Usually more intelligent and fiercely loyal, their animal companion will protect the ranger until the bitter end. Rangers are hunters, and all hunters have a favorite terrain and a favorite enemy. This is no different with rangers. At third level, you can choose a ranger archetype, which can differ greatly, sometimes giving your animal companion power and sometimes to bolster you directly. One of the most important things to remember about a ranger is their hunter's mark. It is a spell that only a ranger can cast, which, when cast on an enemy, is going to allow the ranger to track them even after they've fled. A lot of OG players don't see the ranger as a good class, but I think they're wrong. If played properly, rangers can be one of the biggest assets to a party. Rangers are also half casters, but gain a lot of spells that can be used to devastating effects. Give them a bow and arrow, and they could knock the hat off of someone a mile away. Further on down, you see someone with a plate solely of vegetables. Staff with flowers and mushrooms growing all along its side sits behind them, and you could swear you saw the eyes of a lion for a brief second. They look at you and smile as they craft a flower out of thin air and offer it out. Druids are full casters who can change the shape of their bodies to embody different animals. As you grow in power, these animals even include some that can fly or swim. Masters of nature, they have an expansive spell list that could even rival the wizard, almost. Also, they don't have to learn their spells in the same way a wizard does, as they're already known. But also, like the wizard, druids don't have a lot of health to support a long battle. That can change, however, when they switch into an animal form. They get the health of whatever animal they transformed into. Most people will call the druid a glass cannon because of their spellcasting and relatively low health. At level 3, druids are going to choose a circle that they follow. All of these circles have nature themes in one way or another, but they are vast. incredibly fast. Druids are normally a very versatile fighter, being able to attack at range as well as be in melee combat. At later levels, they can even cast a spell that lets them teleport by using any tree that they know of. Kind of weird, but also pretty funny. Coming out of the back room and taking a seat next to the druid, still trying to belt their pants back on, and pulling out a lute to start plucking on, we have the bard. Well, not known for their combat ability, bards are going to be the ultimate utility caster, having access to a full spell list as well as being able to inspire the other party members before taking on a difficult challenge inside or outside of combat. Bards are known to be very charismatic, which is where you hear their stories of, I seduced a dragon. If you haven't seen it on Netflix and you're looking for inspiration for your bard, I'd highly recommend watching The Witcher. Uh, Jaskier's really an incredible bard, and also the writing was pretty great too. Bards do not get a lot of hit points and really need to stay away from the action and combat, but boast a wide range of spells to dazzle and confuse enemies. Where wizards get to choose a school, apparently bards get to have more advanced degrees and get to choose a bardic college at third level. Literally hurting people with sass and being too charismatic for their own good, the bard is a very interesting class to play. But make sure you aren't being a detriment to your party. It's a very easy way to get kicked out of your campaign if you're not being a fun bard. Holding a smaller but still very impressive keg, you see a battle hardened fighter wearing multiple swords and scarred from head to toe. We have the, well, fighter. Fighters possess no innate magical ability, but there are a select few fighter archetypes that can wield magic. They're masters of martial weapons and can use them to devastating effect. Fighters are definitely alongside the barbarian at the center of combat. One of their biggest features is available to them at level 2, and their action surge, which basically lets them take another turn as long as they don't move, so they can attack even more. They also gain extra attacks at their highest level. They could really attack 6 times in a single turn of combat while using everything that they have to their advantage, which makes the fighter very effective at doing high damage. The fighter can choose different fighting styles to align better with their character. For example, some fighters might want to pick up a bow and arrow instead of a sword, or might want to dual wield 2 scimitars. Their martial archetypes are probably the most varied out of all the classes, which makes the fighter a great choice if you don't want to deal with preparing much, but don't want to fall into the traditional barbarian category. Looking down at a clockwork contraption through thick spectacles after completely forgetting about the food in front of them, you see the Artificer. Artificers don't have spells or arcane talent in the traditional sense. All of their spells are cast through elaborate enchanted items that they make. Don't worry, this is just for flavor and can be omitted in actual combat if you'd like, but they're only half casters, so the amount of spells they have access to is limited. Starting at level 3, they can choose their Artificer specialty, creating a suit of armor, portable cannons, or an iron defender that can aid them in combat. These subclasses let the Artificer have a few different combat styles, but not anywhere near the amount the fighter could possibly have. One of their most potent abilities comes at level 2, Artificer Infusions. These will allow the Artificer to create a magical item that they can use whenever they want. An Artificer can only have a select number of infusions, though, but these can be replaced at certain higher levels. They're also the only class in D&D that can have more than 3 items attuned to them at once. So most items that require attunement are going to be very powerful magical items that will bolster your abilities in one way or another. And just as a side note here, the Artificer is probably one of my favorite classes to play out of all of the classes, and I will definitely make a longer video about them in the future. Watching the Artificer's work with an amused expression, Draped in opulent robes and sitting with an air of authority, you next look at the sorcerer. Sorcerers are powerful magical users who have had their magic since birth and didn't have to go through any of the training or schooling that wizards go through to be able to cast their spells. Although full casters, they don't have as exhaustive of a spell list when compared to wizards, but they'll make up for it with their use of sorcery points. Sorcery points are unique to sorcerers and will let them accomplish great feats, like being able to turn a single fireball spell into two fireballs with their use of meta magic. As they grow stronger, they have access to more sorcery points, which could really be a video in and of itself. But if you're a new player, the sorcerer can seem a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, it is pretty easy to get the hang of it. And whenever you're making your character, you're going to choose one of your sorcerer's origins, which is going to give you access to many different abilities and spells across a wide range of playstyles. Sitting on the table, legs crossed and eyes closed in a deep meditative state, you see the monk. Monks are all about punching in non bladed martial weapons for the most part. Where the sorcerer gets sorcery points, monks will get key points to empower their attacks, starting at second level, so pretty quickly as well. Spending your key points will allow you to do many different things, but starting out, you'll know Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, and Step of the Wind. So, Flurry of Blows is going to let you use your bonus action that we talked about earlier to make an extra two punches during your turn. Patient Defense will help you steal yourself at the end of your turn, which will make you harder to hit. And Step of the Wind will allow you to take the dash action on your turn, in effect, doubling the amount of space you can move. All of these are bonus actions, so you're kind of limited to using one of these on your turn for the most part. At third level, you will choose a monastic tradition. Usually, these will line up with a certain fighting style. Monks have the special ability to use deflect missiles. So, if an enemy shoots you with a bow and arrow, you can either punch the arrow out of the air or just catch it and fling it back at your attacker. Mo- uh, Monks usually have the use of slow fall, which will allow them to negate any damage that they would have taken from falling, for the most part. Finally, standing off to the side, you see a horned tiefling leaning against the wall, drinking in the chaos the party is making, and smiling broadly. When you look into their eyes, you can briefly see the fires of hell as shadows seem to swarm around their body. A small imp flies over to them and whispers something in their ear. You have just laid eyes on a warlock. Warlocks are full spellcasters who got their magic from a dark pact with some sort of evil entity. While you're making this character, you'll choose who your patron is. They will be the one who's going to give you some of their magic. You will choose Eldritch Invocations, which will help bolster your Warlock spells and strengthen your bond with whatever has lent you some of their power, as long as you are serving their cause. Warlocks are full casters, but won't have access to the amount of spells the Wizard and Sorcerer have. But the spells they do know are incredible. Each of the patrons that a warlock can choose will grant different powers and abilities, and will sometimes send you on a quest to further their mysterious plans. I will definitely do a video about a player in one of my old campaigns who played the greatest warlock I have ever seen. Years later, we still talk about him and what he is doing inside of my world. The warlock is an amazing fighting class, but can also be pretty terrific outside of combat because of their charisma, talking their way into a swanky ball that the party would have never been invited to otherwise. As you look around the tavern at the motley crew, thinking about your weary bones and soaked clothing, you ultimately decide to get as far away from this town and tavern as quickly as possible. Turning around and heading out the door back out into the rain and darkness. As you make your way down the road, you hear the flapping of thunderous wings soaring over you as a dragon lands right outside the tavern. I do hope you liked this video, and I promise there will be more to come, even if you didn't. I want to cover the basics of D&D for new players, but I also have plans for a set of videos for how to start becoming a dungeon master, as well as a dungeon master class, which is always going to be my preferred role. And maybe down the line, I can talk about some of my old campaigns in the world that I've spent 5 years creating. That's all for now. So if you'd like to see more of this content, please don't forget to like and follow. If you would like to ask me a more direct question, you can either leave it down in the comments or just jump on one of my streams and you can ask me directly. I'll see you next time, and watch out for for dragons and unusually eccentric patrons of taverns.